All right, we're going to pick up where we left off. So we're looking at the south door of the Baptistry of Florence Cathedral, designed by Andrea Pisano. Now we're going to look at it a little bit more carefully. Now the bronze casting and gilding in gold, was done by the Venetian Leonardo di Avezzano, who was widely recognized as one of the best bronze smiths in Europe. It took 6 years to complete these doors that you see before you. 6 years. There are 14 panels in each door. You can count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then times 2 is 14. Okay. There's going to be a motif called a quatrefoil. Quatre. Quatre is going to mean four. Foil, F-O-I-L. So basically, we'll look at this next image, and if you look at this outside design, it's kind of like a four-leaf clover. There's 4 lobes, okay? But then there's this barbed. If you follow this barbed line, if you made an implied line, it's like a diamond inside of a 4-leaf clover. That's basically the shape. And each of the 4 lobes represents the 4 books in the Bible, in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those were their accounts of their lives spent with Jesus in his ministry. So inside of these quatrefoil designs is an image. And again, there's 14 on each door, and the theme is the life of John the Baptist. So we have 28 panels that run across both doors from left to right. And it starts with basically the birth, the ministry, and the death. Okay. So on each motif, Andrea placed low reliefs with smooth flowing lines inside each quatrefoil, as you see here. The details of the folds and the drapery of the clothing that the figures are wearing are designed in the basically the late Gothic style manner. Pisano was a master at making his compositions basically speak a narrative story. So he was influenced by Giotto with his figurative depictions. We'll learn more about Giotto later on. And so here we have an example of one of those low relief designs. He has some figurative elements in it. You see 3 figures here, and then a little bit of architectural detail. This is a Roman arch. That curved arch, that's a Roman arch. A pointed arch, which we'll look at a little bit later, is an example of a Gothic arch. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the work of Duccio. Now, Duccio was from Siena, and he was, in Siena, there was a splendid school of painting, and Duccio was basically, he was considered a master painter and had many students underneath him. Remember, back in these days, they had apprenticeships. So if you wanted to become a painter, you did not go to art school. There was no such thing as art schools. You joined a guild, and you went and worked with the master, and you apprenticed with him, and Duccio was a master, okay? So when I say school of painting, it's not a real school. It's a studio that he has set up for apprenticeships. So Siena was basically a major economic, political, and a cultural center of Tuscany. Again, Tuscany is one of the regions in Italy. And for a long time, a rival with Florence, both politically and artistically. And again, remember, each of these cities are city-states, and they kind of, they kind of war against each other, and they're very competitive against each other as well. Now, Siena was originally founded by the Etruscans. If you took art history survey 1 and 2 with me, you would learn before Rome was Rome, before Italy was Italy, the Etruscans lived on the peninsula, okay? And then later, Rome was formed where the Etruscan culture had previously lived. Now, Siena reached the height of its affluence in the 13th and the 14th centuries when it witnessed basically a great flowering of art and the construction of major monuments such as the Campo, which is a scalloped-shaped central square before the Palazzo Pubblico, the town hall, and the magnificent cathedral with its striped green and white marble columns. Some of the cathedrals in Italy are just breathtaking, and they have privy to a lot of beautiful colored marbles in different regions in Italy that they would bring in and adorn their cathedrals with. Now, the thing about Italy, if you ever go to Italy, which I hope you do someday, the towns have what are called squares. So squares, it's like a town square. I don't know if you've ever been to like McKinney, Texas, or Bentonville, Arkansas, or even Fayetteville, Arkansas, but they have a town square where the courthouse is, and then neighborhoods around the square. So you see a lot of that in Italy. At the same time, the Sienese painting experienced its creative and aesthetic peak. Again, we're talking about Siena. So Duccio worked to create the art of narrative in his artwork. And anything that's going to have narrative means a story. If you wrote a narrative about something, you would be writing a story about something. Well, the same is true in art. If you paint a narrative, you're painting a story about something. So Duccio was interested in realistic landscapes. He was interested in human emotions. He placed sacred stories in a vast variety of interior and outdoor spaces and showed a wide range of interactions between the holy figures, making them seem human and their world very, very real. So when we talk about holy figures, for instance, in the Maesta altarpiece that you see here, we have the Virgin Mary. She's considered the Queen of Heaven, and the Christ child on her lap. Okay. So Duccio never fully rejected the Byzantine style, but was moving away from it in his artwork. And he created large altarpieces. And these large altarpieces, like the one you see in front of you, would go inside of a church or a Duomo. Now, this one is very special. This altarpiece is double-sided, so there's artwork on both sides. And each one of these images that you see running across the bottom, they're painted on a separate panel, and then this elaborate wood frame basically puts all these individual pieces together. So think of these as individual paintings inside of a larger group of paintings. Okay. Now, this altarpiece shows the Madonna and Child, Jesus, Mary and Jesus enthroned, and the saints and the angels are at the front. Okay, here along each side. The front panel is Byzantine in style. I'll just show you. We'll see if, yeah, you can see this in a little bit larger in this image. Now, the Byzantine artists, when they painted the face, it was flat. The color was one color. There wasn't any shading or value from light to dark. But in the Proto-Renaissance, leading up into the Italian Renaissance, artists start to model the figure. They start to use chiaroscuro. You learned that word earlier. It means to model from light to dark, to make figures look more realistic. So they looked more three-dimensional. And on the reverse side, which faces the choir, basically that's where the clergy sat during the services, more than 50 scenes of the life of Christ unfold in a series of landscapes, cities, and interior settings. So these images show more of Duccio's power of narration in his mature work. He was experimenting basically with new pictorial ideas. The backside was dismantled in the 16th century, and now those different panels are in museums all over the world. So it's not a whole unit anymore. Only the front side is completely whole. And those different museums, they don't want to let go of their Duccio painting to make the altarpiece complete again. There were these images were meant to be read visually because a lot of the townspeople, the laymen, they were illiterate. In the Middle Ages, there wasn't a lot of schooling. Only the most wealthy were educated, and so a lot of the people couldn't read or write, and the church used a lot of images to tell stories about the life of Jesus so that people would be saved. Okay, that was part of their mission, was to save souls for God. Now, moving the work from Ducio's studio to the high altar at the cathedral was an event. And this actually happened on June the 19th in 1311. There was a great civic and religious event, and they had to move this altarpiece from the studio of the artist to the church. And all the townspeople came out, shops closed, people lit candles. It was like a parade marching down the street in Siena, and everyone was so excited to bring this beautiful piece of artwork into the great church. One local chronicler wrote, "The shops were locked up, and the bishop ordered a solemn procession of the clergy, officials of the commune, and all the populace with lights lit in their hands, and they accompanied it right to the Duomo, sounding all the bells of glory, out of devotion for such a noble panel." So that's a really neat event. So in this next image, you'll see a detail of the boy Christ disputing the elders. Here's a full image. So here's an image. Let me make this a little larger for you. This is Jesus. Okay, this is an example of when your parents go on a trip out of town or out of state. They stop at a gas station, and everybody goes into the gas station to use the restroom, to buy some snacks. They leave the gas station, they get back on the highway, on the interstate, and then they notice one of the kids is not with them in the car. Oh my gosh, we left Johnny at the gas station. So they all double back and go back to the gas station to find Johnny. Well, this is kind of what happens in the life of Jesus. Now, this is the first recorded example of Jesus actually teaching, and it's called The Dispute. This painting is. And this story is told in Luke chapter 2, verses 42 through 51. So after the return from Egypt, when Jesus was 12 years old, the Holy Family lived in the village of Nazareth. So at this time, his parents took him to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When Mary and Joseph set off with the group on their return home journey, at first they were unaware that Jesus had remained behind. They traveled an entire day and looked for him among their relatives and their friends. When they did not find him, they hurried back to the city. On the third day, they found him in the temple, surrounded by the Jewish teachers, which were known as doctors or rabbis, with whom he was engaged in a learned conversation. So here he is. He's shown counting on his fingers. He's counting his different arguments. And Mary and Joseph are shown to the left, over here to the left, and they're kind of reaching out towards him. And Mary asks, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been terribly worried trying to find you." And he answered them, "Why did you look for me? Don't you know that I have to be about my Father's house?" So even at this early age, Jesus knew that his life was to be dedicated to doing the ministry of God. All right. Now, here's another panel. This is called Entry into Jerusalem. And if we look at this one in detail, here you see Jesus riding on a donkey. This is a scene that is more dictates the end of Jesus's life. He is coming in on a donkey, and he's not on a noble steed like a general would be or an emperor. He's humbling himself. He's on a donkey, okay? But it's the same metaphor